Okay, we want to continue along with our transactions here, and I'm going to include one that is actually not in the book here. I'm just labeling it 6C. We're going to repay the loan now. And in our world, to keep the scenario simplistic, we're going to assume that there's absolutely no interest rate and that business was so good when the person opened up his Fit and Fitness or spa one day that he or she was able to pay the whole $50,000 back in one particular lump sum. So when the loan is repaid, we go back to our initial transaction when the check was cashed from the loan. Nothing happens to demand deposits. Remember, the person who took the money out for the loan is not putting money into his demand deposits. Instead, he's paying off his loan. We're simply going to take that money and put it back into our reserve column. And therefore, if we can go back to what 6B was, our reserves were only $10,000. They repay the loan. And we put that simply back into our reserves, and our reserves go up to 60. Property and stock is still the same, so we have $300,000. Now, it's very important in this particular situation. I draw your attention over here in transaction 5. Earlier we said that our M1 was equal to cash and demand deposits. In transaction 5, we had 0 in cash, 50 in demand deposits, and our M1 our money supply was 50. When we made the loan, we said that when a bank makes a loan, money is created. And we see that here, that our demand deposits went to $100,000 when the loan was granted, and our money supply increased. In this case, the change was 50. And so we said, when the bank makes a loan, money is created. When the loan is repaid, when that person came in and gave me that $50,000, that money ceased to exist. We say that the money is destroyed. Because before that person will give me that $50,000, I have to give that person the IOU, the promissory note. He gives me the $50,000. I give him the promissory note. He no longer owes me the money. The reserves are back the way they were. And therefore, our money supply in 6C is 0 for cash, 50 for demand deposits. And therefore, our money supply went back to exactly the way it was in number 5. The money ceased to exist. That person cannot take that promissory note down to Wawa and buy $1.50 Coca-Cola. It's useless. It no longer exists. It ceases to exist. So that's very important. 7. We are going to buy a security from a security holder. Now, basically, I just have up here from the public. Let's assume that you have $50,000 in a T-bill or a treasury note. And I come to you as owner of the bank and say, I'd like to buy that $50,000 treasury note or treasury bond from you. It's a United States security. Basically, you lent the United States $50,000 is what it amounts to. And I want to buy that from you. So you tell me, sure, I'll go ahead and sell it to you. But before you give me your security, I'm going to give you a check for $50,000. And what you're going to do is you're going to put that money into your checking account. I still have my reserves, but I have a new income earning asset called a security. Obviously, the United States security worth $50,000. Everything else is still the same. And if we take a look at this, we can see that transaction 7 is exactly equal to transaction 6. That in this case, the money supply again went up by $50,000 because I have given you $50,000 and you're going to deposit that in my bank. So therefore, a bank can create money. A single bank can create money by granting a loan or by buying securities. We have to understand, though, that a bank can only lend out its excess reserves. And we saw that in 6B or 6A, where if a bank lends out more in its excess reserves, it is in violation of the Reserve requirement condition of joining the Fed. And therefore, a single bank can only lend out its excess reserves. But the banking system, the entire commercial banking system, can lend out a multiple of the excess reserves. In other words, let's take a look at this few iterations. This is called the multiple deposit expansion. We're going to assume that our reserve ratio is 20%. We have a deposit that's going to find its way to our bank, let's say Bank 1. Bank 1 now has an increase in demand deposits of $50,000. Our reserve ratio is 20%, or we have to hold $10,000 in reserve for this person. That means that this bank has excess reserves of $40,000, which will find its way to another bank. Let's say this is M&T, and this is going to find its way to First National Bank of Pennsylvania. First National Bank of Pennsylvania. Now has deposits of $40,000. It has to hold $8,000. It lends out $32,000, which will find its way to TD Bank, which has to keep $6,400, which means it can lend out $25,000, which will find its way to bank, whatever it is, Bank 4. Then keep $5,120, lend out $2,480 to Bank 5. And in these short 5 scenarios, our money supply has actually increased with just these 5 iterations to $168,000. So what we want to find out is how much money is created throughout the entire banking system to a point where our excess reserves are zero. And there's a very simple mathematical way of doing it. And this is allowing us to find what is called the money multiplier, because that's what's happening here. Our deposits, demand deposits, are multiplying. Our money multiplier is equal to 1 divided by the reserve requirement. So in other words, in this case, the money multiplier is equal to 1 divided by 0.2, or is 5. So therefore, in order for us to find the change in the money supply, we take the change in excess reserves times the money multiplier. In this case, it's 40, which was our change in excess reserves, times 5, which gives us $200,000. So if we, in fact, continue this process the whole way down, this amount would come to $200,000 when our excess reserves are zero, and it would equal this. So therefore, what happens is that our money is actually multiplying itself. Now, let's take a look and see what happens when our reserve ratio is decreased. In other words, 10% from 20%. Well, our money multiplier is equal to 1 divided by the reserve ratio, or 1 divided by 0.10, or there are 10 cents in a dollar, if that's actually a word. And what we have is the change in the money supply is equal to the change in excess reserves times the money multiplier. 40 times 10 is equal to 400,000. And in other words, our money supply has doubled. And think about it. This is the rationale. Here, I had to hold 20 cents of every dollar of demand deposits. Now I only have to hold 10 cents. So therefore, because of that, when the reserve requirement is lowered, it expands the money supply more. From this case, it doubled from $200,000 to $400,000. If the reserve requirement is increased to, let's say, 50, well, in that case, this would be 1 divided by 50. How many half dollars are in a dollar? That would be 2. And in this case, our money supply would only increase to 80. So therefore, if the reserve requirement is increased, the money supply is decreased. If the reserve requirement is lowered, then the money supply is increased. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them on discussion board. Email me personally. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Be sure to read these chapters and all the chapters. Very important. Thank you very much and have a good day.